Gluten-free, coast to coast with Jess and Nick. Welcome back to another episode of Gluten-free Coast to Coast. You got Nick here.
What's up?
And you got Jess. We're back this week to finish up our three-part series of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So this week we're talking about the ugly, and that is going to be mostly us complaining about having celiac disease. It's going to be the times when it's been hard, and not like the eating out times it's been hard where we covered in our first episode, the ugly. But this is just like in general, some of the stuff we thought of that has not been fun. And then we will be sharing to sort of to wrap up the eating out piece, the how we talk to restaurants about gluten free. I think we've both sort of figured out like what works best for us. And I know recently I sort of have figured that out. So we'll share with you what's been working. All right. Cool. So let's jump right in. The first one that I wanted to sort of talk about, which to me is like the ultimate ugly, is because it's not good and it's not bad. It's just like this middle ground of always having to pick where you eat out. So when we're with our gluten eating friends, we have to, they're so kind, right, Nick? Like we have good, supportive gluten eating friends.
Well, and like this topic too is gonna make us sound like we're just complaining because like why would we complain about always having to eat out? But for me, it's not necessarily the choosing where we're eating. It's like we go out on our terms. Like, you know, all of our friends, yeah, they're very supportive, but they're like, all right, Nick's with us. So Nick, where we're eating tonight. And I never, for
Yeah.
me, I don't like being the center of attention like that. I don't like that I'm always the one that's put in charge just because of my my celiac. So to me, that's honestly one of the ugliest.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing. Like the we wouldn't always be picking if we didn't have celiac, but we have celiac. So if we're involved, we have to pick where we're going, which again, I think is good intentioned.
Yeah. Oh, and the thing is, like, again, we have really good friends, so it's always like, oh, Nick's with us. Like, Nick, where do you want to eat? I'm like in my head, I'm like, I can always find gluten-free food anywhere, whether it's something I actually want to eat or not. But my thing is like,
Right.
go eat where you guys want to eat, and I'll figure it out. Because like before I was gluten-free, like I don't think I ever really chose where we ate. You know, it was like, Nick, we're going out here, meet us there. Now it's like, oh, maybe we'll go have dinner and Nick meet us out for drinks or something like that. It was all being gluten free and going out to eat. Uh, it's tough, especially like when you have a group of friends that cares. And again, I said this was shouldn't be us like complaining about the little things, but this is a very ugly thing for me.
Well, and that's why we're talking about the ugly, because it's easy to say like these are all the bad food experiences I had, and these are all the good food experiences I had, right? Like we can name all of those times, but the ugly is the part that I think we all secretly feel guilty about or sad about or angry, right? And then we all feel like we're experiencing it alone. So could it sound like complaining for sure? And we're both gonna feel guilty because that's the ugly part
Well,
about
and
it.
like one of our later topics too, and so I don't want to jump ahead too far, but like when Jess and I will go out to eat, our mom will be with us, and we'll just be like, oh, this we're gluten free, this and that, and we don't want to make the big fuss about it. And then she's like, no, 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 this is what's gonna happen because my children need this. And to me, I'm like, I can't do that. Not that like I
Yeah,
don't mind that she's doing it. I love that she's doing it, looking out for us. But like again, it's the making
totally.
the scene part. So like, not only did we have to pick where we could eat, now like other people are making a fuss for me, and I don't know.
Right. Well, we've definitely had better eating out experiences because she's advocated for us.
Oh, for
So
sure.
it's so hard. But I think what's really interesting is because you got sick before I did. Um, so when we would like when you had celiac and I didn't have it yet, I would always be like, you need to advocate better for yourself, or like I would be just like mom and being like, you got to do this, and then like literally a month into having celiac myself, I'm like, oh, I get it now. Like I get why it sucks. Where I would like fight people for you in a restaurant, like when we were eating out. because it wasn't me. And then the second it was me, I'm like, no, it's fine. We'll both just sit here and eat this like romaine lettuce. It's good.
Yeah. Well, and like I don't know if it's like more of a California thing, but like out here, every time I ask for gluten free, they ask if it's an allergy or a preference. And I think preference out here mostly because it's a fad diet for people and they do it just because. Um,
Right.
but you can tell, honestly, that I when I was talking to you earlier, just I think I flip flopped it because honestly, I do think when I say allergy, people are like, okay, like if you're gonna be gluten free, at least have the allergy. When it's preference,
Yes.
I mean, they don't care at all. Like I don't think they'll change their gloves because like, and that's something to me, like I see that and in my head, I'm like, oh, they must be super annoyed with me because now they have to go through all these different steps and it's just another, I hate doing it. I don't like doing it,
Yeah.
but
So I am the same way. And let's have a little mental health corner with Jess the therapist. So that's a cognitive distortion, right? It's the idea that we have this thought that we don't have evidence to support, right? We talked about this last week. Like, there is no evidence to support that that person is mad at you. Like, and the only evidence that would be valid is them looking at me and going, I'm really annoyed that you are making me change my gloves. Otherwise, we don't have proof. Everything else is an interpretation from our anxiety, right? So, interpreting rolling eyes, interpreting body language is not hard evidence. So, it's our anxiety, like what you just described is such a perfect example of a cognitive distortion that comes up from anxiety with celiac because we don't want to mess up anyone's day or have to be accommodated, right? And that's our own journey. And so we're like projecting it onto these people who are probably like, yeah, it's cool. I'm like super happy to help. I'm glad you're not a fad dieter.
mm. Well, so then I'm gonna be the person in therapy right now. What
Okay.
when I go into a restaurant though, like how do I get over that anxiety? Because it happens to me every what am I 8 years in and I still like get nervous going to a place that I know will accommodate me when I go in, you know?
Yeah. So I think that's a great question because I always, when I'm working with, clients, I always sort of preface it with like, I'm not saying that now you know that it's a cognitive distortion that I've now cured your anxiety, right? Like now you know about it,
Mm,
so you can choose to make changes around it. So the idea is that thought's not gonna stop. It's not that there's not enough therapy on earth to make you walk in there and not have that thought of like, oh, they're gonna like be mad at me. So that thought's gonna pop into your head, and what cognitive behavioral therapy is about is we go, so the thought is they're mad at me because I am making them have to, change their gloves. And we go, wait, nope, this is my brain tricking me. This is anxiety. I have no evidence to support. I mean, you're literally having a conversation in your head, talking yourself through your anxiety. And that's the skill. That's like with anything, like, oh,
mm,
they're looking at my shirt weird. They must not like it. Or any anxiety that we can experience, we want to look at what is the automatic thought, what is the feeling that it causes, and what's the behavior because of that. So we're thinking they don't want to change their gloves. They're probably mad at me. We start to feel real worried, real anxious, which means we then don't advocate for ourselves, which then our brain, we go back up to the top of that triangle and our brain's like, see, told you, look, you've made them so unhappy. And we end up in this cycle. So the skill is going to be acknowledging it, right? Oh, there's that thought. And I have no evidence to support that they're actually mad at me. I mean, have there been people who were rude? 1,000,000%. And you can cry about that in the car. I remember crying up. We're going to put our head back. But more times than not, and even if they are mad, that's their journey, right? Like,
yeah.
I didn't choose this. And that's actually been a helpful sort of mantra for myself is like, I didn't choose this because people will always be like, oh man, I could never give up bread. And I'm like, yeah, this wasn't a choice I made. I actually really love bread.
Well, and
Like,
so I've had those that same conversation though, where you have to like talk yourself through it. And when I was at
yeah,
school, I always felt so bad. I mean, we talked about it before where I was just eating salmon all the time. I felt bad
right,
saying no, and I didn't have this conversation with myself. I actually had it with our mom, who, first of all, she probably cares more about me being gluten free than I do. Like she takes it to a whole new level of parenting, and she's the best. But
yes,
she was the one who had to be like, Nick, it is their job to make sure you eat. If you don't want to eat something, tell them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not their problem. It's not your problem. Like, it's just what it is. And
Mm-hmm.
after that, after, because the chef came out and talked to me, after that, it became much easier for me to go down and get food at the student center, or be like, hey, I'm not feeling, the food you have for me today. What else can I get? Um,
Right.
so,
But
but it's
that's
tough. Whether it's with you or like maybe talk it through with someone else or listen to us. It's something you need
yeah.
to do to get over the anxiety of going out to eat.
But what I'm hearing is that like mom gave you that mantra to say in your head so that I don't imagine that you stopped thinking, "Oh, I hate that I have to do this" when you walked
Oh
into
yeah.
the cafeteria.
No, every time I walked in, I was like, oh, I hate having to do this. But as I got up to them and talked to them, it was like, look, it is what it is. It's their job. Whether they look miserable when they walk up to me, probably wasn't me. They worked at a college
Right.
cafeteria. Like, there's a lot of other nonsense that goes on at college cafeterias, and it
Right.
could have just been a bad day. Like, so, it was something that I had to remember. Like, it's their job to feed me. Uh, am I going to have anxiety telling them, no, I don't want salmon for the fifth day straight? Sure. But again, it's their
Mm-hmm.
job to make sure I'm fed.
But right, like that's such a perfect example, Nick, of exactly what we're talking about with this cognitive triangle, because it's the idea of that thought still popped up, but you were able to challenge that, right? With the little kids, we call it you're being a worry detective. You were able to look for the clues and go, no, I'm okay, right? Because we didn't
Yeah.
choose like all of that evidence. So it's super cool to hear that you did it and it worked.
Well, and by my probably my junior and senior year in college, like I used to be the only one in like the gluten-free line is what we ended up calling it, because we just kind of waited in the corner
Hmm.
while they got our food. So, but by my junior and senior year, we had like 3 or 4 people that would congregate, and I remember there was this one girl who, like, she would just come up and be like, yeah, I don't want that, thanks. I'll take this. Like, it wouldn't even be like one of their choices, but like they always told me, they're like, if you want pasta any day, we can boil up some pasta for you and we'll put some like cheese on it. Uh,
Yeah.
and she would do that. And in my head, I'm like, oh no, how did she learn to do that? Like
Yeah.
all she had to do was ask and she got what she wanted. And it's because
Right.
like she was like, look, I didn't choose to be gluten free. They
Hmm.
have to deal with feeding me. So yeah, it was that was crazy for me to see, because to me, I couldn't do it.
Right. Well, I don't think it's something that comes naturally. And like, again, I can say it because I have the training on how to tell other people how to do it. But that does not mean that I, by any stretch of the imagination, nail it. But my advice to you on that would be to create a mantra. Sometimes I recommend starting with like, I'm okay. Just,
Mhm.
it's easy. It's not something that has to be rooted in fact. I have a wonderful wellness practitioner I worked with, and her mantra for me was always like, I'm worthy of, like, what are you worthy of? And
Mhm.
sometimes starting with, I'm worthy of a meal that won't hurt me is really hard. Like, that's a hard one to be like, I believe this fully and it's going to send my anxiety away. So sometimes just starting with, like, I'm okay. Like, in this
Mhm.
moment, I'm okay, which turns to, what evidence do I have? Which turns to, I'm worthy of a good meal.
Yeah, and like looking forward to like our next topic here is snacks in the car. Is like it's every like me and my friends, we were big on just like on our way to the baseball field or on the way
Mhm.
back from basketball practice, we would grab snacks. They'd go to 7-Eleven and pick up whatever they wanted. There's a Dunkin' Donuts right at the corner or right at the circle in our hometown. So you go from our high school down to Dairy Queen, and then you go up to the baseball field. And we would just always get Dairy Queen before. And there's always stuff for me to eat, but again, it was tough. I couldn't have the snacks I wanted on the buses in high school going to like a sports game. Like if it was baseball season, we'd have to go somewhere, and they could go out and get snacks. And you and I, Jess, it's something that we've done for a while. I actually need to get back into it, but it's carrying snacks with you.
Right. Well, so tell us about how this started for you, like the bucket in your car.
Oh, I mean, I honestly, I kind of forget the story. I just remember I like wasn't eating snacks. I wasn't eating, right?
Don't worry, I'll tell the
Yeah,
story.
I probably
So
blacked it
when
out a long time ago. I don't remember this.
we were just talking about it. You when you were first diagnosed, I don't know if mom read it like in a book or on like saw it on YouTube or something like that. But you had like a small Rubbermaid in the back of your car,
Yeah,
which so like that's not like a Tupperware, like a
yeah.
Rubbermaid
It was
bucket.
a big thing in the back of the car. I remember. I don't remember why I got it.
It was full of snacks. It was so like when your
Oh yeah,
friends went
yeah,
to
yeah,
McDonald's, you would have like pirate's booty to be
yeah.
eating with them while they ate.
Yeah, so that I mean that was the big thing too. Is like my friends weren't like, we're not gonna give up McDonald's because Nick can't eat it. Like I rolled with like I don't know, probably like 6 buddies all the time, and
Mhm.
they're like, yeah, we're not gonna give up McDonald's. Sorry, dude.
They're
So
also like 16, so you
well,
know.
that too, but they also like at the time I had I don't know if yeah, well at that time maybe I had the biggest car. Either way, I feel like I was always driving, and so I would drive there with them, and so we carried a big Rubbermaid of gluten-free snacks, pirate booty. The big thing, because we were talking about this the other day. You are right there that like you have to be very selective about what you put in the back. First of all, snacks that you like, but like I'm out here in California. I can't
Right.
leave like granola bars with chocolate chips in there. That stuff just melts on you.
No.
But yeah, I mean the ugly part of hanging out with friends is you can't get snacks when they get snacks.
Right. Well, and like bigger picture, it's just that spontaneity is taken away. Like
Mhm.
you can't just pick a random restaurant. You have to do the research. You can't just like hop in your car. I mean, well, I mean, you can live your best life,
Yeah.
but there's some planning into like, I mean, I last Wednesday I had like a bunch of appointments back to back, and I'm like, okay, well, it's at like 12, 1, and 2, and they're in different places, and I know that there will be nowhere for me to stop and get quick food between like Rochester and York. And so I had to pack snacks in between. And the older I get, the more I'm realizing like cookies are not going to sustain me through lunch time. So like bringing food that's nutritious. But honestly, actually, this Wednesday I did only pack cookies. Just a long story for another time. But you know, having to think about that every time I leave the house of when is the next time I'll eat. If I'm not hungry when I leave, should I eat now because there won't be anywhere for me to eat?
Well, that happened to me the other day. On Saturday. So we're taping this on a Monday. The previous Saturday, I had to work, and I was super nervous for the shoot. It was, the
Mm.
second time we were doing it, and I didn't eat breakfast in the morning, but we had to be there at. It was 12:30, but I wanted to be there at like 11 because there was some setup I needed to do, and so way before lunch, but also like I should have eaten before I left, and I just couldn't get myself to eat because I was sick. And I remember talking to my roommate as I left, like I really should have eaten some food because I'm not going to
Mhm.
eat till like 6 that night, and I didn't because I didn't pack snacks. There's a vending machine in our office because we were filming in our office, but like not a whole lot for me there, and it would be like a bag of chips for like $5 because it's really overpriced
Right.
for some reason. uh,
And I was just saying that's the thing too of like bringing snacks that will actually sustain you because like you can have the chips to regulate your blood sugar so you don't feel like you're gonna die, but like your body's still not getting what it needs, so then you're gonna feel like crap no matter what. Like
yeah,
it's a no-win when you forget to pack food.
yeah. I mean, I could have snacked because there was a lot of time where I was just like sitting there. Like, once I got everything set up and the shoot actually started. I mean, I wasn't the one calling cameras or moving X, Y, and Z around, but I could have definitely like been snacking, and I didn't bring anything. And so for work too, I travel a lot, and I don't know how
Right.
many times our mom has said, Nick, make sure you bring like a pack of granola bars in your backpack for the flight, but also when we're on set, when I didn't get enough for lunch because I'm only eating salads because the places we go don't have gluten free. Um, she just always brings snacks, and I do need to get better at that because I've now like trained my body to just be like, oh, you're not eating, you're fine.
You're
I
not hungry. Yeah.
yeah, like I went the other day till 6:30 without eating, and at that point I was very hungry, but I very easily skip through lunch because like our shooting schedule is always changed, and when we are able to eat, lunch changes. So I've just kind of like taught my body to be like, yeah, you're hungry, get over it. And that's not a good way
Right.
to live. I should pack snacks with me, because the food we have on set just isn't for me all the time.
Right. Well, and I'm thinking like about travel
Mm-hmm.
and how I've gotten progressively. I think I have two words stuck in my head, either lazy or more comfortable. We can go either way with it. But I mean, so we've probably, since I've been diagnosed, been on like 4 or 5 big trips, um, where I've been on an airplane. And when I think about like 2016 going anywhere, I had like a suitcase of just food. Or like Ryan and I went to Disney in 2017, and we ordered groceries to be delivered to our hotel, and I brought food in our suitcase because we shared one, so like a big one. So one side was our clothes, and then the other side was like food and like protein shakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's for me where it was like a turning point where I'm like, this is excessive, because we didn't eat any of it because it was okay, right? So my anxiety was in charge when we were packing, because when we got to Disney, we're like, this is amazing. Like
Yeah.
I can eat whatever I want. That's in general, like I'm a little better than you with this. I always have a snack with
Oh
me
yeah.
because, well, in your defense, I react much differently to hunger, where like I'll pass out.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
Like
I think
I don't eat.
since I've become an adult, and that's in quotes, um, is like when I moved out, when I moved to California, is like I had to grow up very fast, and it was like, all right, like again, I taught myself to not eat. Where there was a stretch of time where I wasn't working, and I was like, oh, we used to go to trivia on Thursdays, and they had free chips and salsa, so that was my
Mhm.
dinner. Like I made
Right.
sure I didn't like I had a sandwich for lunch, and then waited till dinner to eat nachos and salsa, and
Yeah.
that's all I ate that day. So like you and I are very different when it comes to food, because like I can do that where I don't think you could. It's just we're built different, and maybe that goes
Yeah.
hand in hand with the way we react when we eat gluten too.
I know. Yeah, no, I can't not eat. And I I crash, and it's a little bit of my job too. Like I'll be in a session with a kid, and I'll start getting hungry, and I'll start like sweating and shaking, and like my vision starts blurring, and like you can't have that. You're barely holding these kids on by a string in therapy anyways, where they're like
Yeah.
not convinced they should be with you. And I'm like, if I just like pass out, so I sometimes think the people I work with must think I like always eat, because I have like a 10 o'clock snack, and then I have lunch, and then I have like a 3:30 snack in between my 3 and my 4 o'clock sessions with kids. And then I probably honestly have a snack at like 5:30 too before I leave.
Well, because and I think the importance of bringing snacks with you wherever you go is to make sure you don't get gluten when you're out,
Hmm.
because I have, and it was more of like my lack of, like I was too lazy to first of all bring a snack, but then it's like I just need to eat. So I found what I thought without really checking what would be gluten free, and
Hmm.
getting gluten when you're out is, I'd say like if always having to pick where you eat is like ugly because of anxiety, getting gluten when you're out is the biggest ugly because of what you do when you get gluten. Like
Right.
again, Jess and I are much different. The gluten comes out in different ways for us, but
1,000%.
for me, I
My
mean,
body straight up rejects it.
yeah, mine was like, let's see what we can do with this, and then it rejects it. It like takes it in.
Let's
It's like,
try.
that's gluten. That was a mistake.
We got
Let's
to
send
get
it
out of
out.
here quick.
Yeah, let's get out of here quick. So it's something like for me, I've been gluten on set. I've been gluten at friends' house where like I'm done. Like that's it for me for the day. I can't do much, because I made mistakes, and I think I say this, and it's very hypocritical of me because I don't bring snacks anywhere. But if I did, this wouldn't happen at all. Like I wouldn't like the last time I got glutened at work, we were eating dinner somewhere, and I was like, oh yeah, like I can have that, and I was really
Right.
just hungry. It was some risotto dish, which I mean, risotto is really just like rice, but I was like, oh,
Isn't it little pasta?
see, I don't know.
I don't know. Well, actually, Ryan and I had this conversation on Saturday because we were talk about an ugly. There's a restaurant right next to our house which looks over the ocean, and it's like if I didn't have celiac would be the coolest thing
It'd be
because
like
we
I'd
could
be there every
walk
day.
we could walk there
Yeah.
and like get food. And we were wanted to go on a walk, and I had to call them to see what their gluten-free options were before we went. Ugly number one. They didn't pick up their phone. We had to call 3 or 4 times. Not their fault. Yay, they're busy. But like that sucked because I had to call so many times. So now I'm sitting on the stairs just like getting so burnt out. Like I hate this. I hate that I have to do this. I was super annoyed. And then I call and they're like, you can have the Thai salmon, Nick. That they offered me salmon or like a risotto. And even Ryan was like, I don't think you can have risotto. I mean, I trust them enough to know that they wouldn't have given me, but
Yeah.
I wanted like a burger. And it just was it was so frustrating. We spent like half an hour. The sun was going down. It's not like it's warm out in Maine yet.
Yeah.
Um, and it was just so frustrating. Like we couldn't have just walked down to this restaurant and like had a cool meal by the ocean.
Well, and that's where it takes away the spontaneity. Like you guys like, let's go have a nice day down by the ocean. And that spot, like you and I have worked there. They've recently like redone it and made it way better since we worked there. But it's one of those places that like you just want to go and like chill and like relax. And you and I can't really do that. Um,
No,
and
and
that,
like
so go real quick though, going back to the risotto, like because I have a friend who makes risotto and she makes it from rice. So I don't know,
yeah, it's
I'm not
probably
a cook,
rice.
but when I had it at work, I don't know, it probably was rice, but I think there was something else in there because I got very sick. And so like the spontaneity of going out with coworkers is now like every time I go out, I'm like, I probably shouldn't eat here because I don't know what, but also then telling your coworkers you can't eat there is much different than telling your best friends you can't eat there, you know?
Right.
So all
Well, and
kinds of
then like
ugly.
all the ugly because like if you'd brought a snack, like you could eat the snack before you go and then just like get a drink or something
Yeah.
when you're out, which is still socially weird because then everyone's like, don't you want to eat? Aren't you hungry? Oh, I wish I couldn't eat. Look at me. Oh, I'm eating so much food. I wish I could eat like you. I'm like, little do you know, all I want is to eat this pizza.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which brings us to unsolicited advice.
Yeah.
I recently had a run-in with this and a conversation with another Instagrammer, or somebody who Instagrams for celiac. Not that I'm an Instagrammer, but this person actually is. And she had posted about how somebody had told her to like try the organic bread and that bread wouldn't gluten her. And she's like, "Are you kidding? Like, no." And so I was DMing with her about this experience that I had, um, where a person in the state who's like in charge of food quality, I'll leave it vague like that, was having this conversation with me for an inspection and was like, you should try, like she said, on a good day, when you're having a good day, like what's a good day with celiac? Like
When you
I'm like
didn't eat
5 years.
gluten.
Right. 5 years after my diagnosis, my body's pretty healed at this point. Like I don't have just like random bad days unless I've eaten gluten, right?
Mm.
Like for the most part, my symptoms are pretty regulated. Um, so I'm like, I don't know what you mean. And she's like, so just try like high quality bread because, it's the something in the gluten and it's the way it's processed and that's like what people react to. I'm like, I'm 100% sure that I have an autoimmune disease 100% of the time, and that is not determined by the quality of
Yeah.
like
It automatically
the way the
rejects the
gluten.
gluten no matter how high quality it is. Like,
No, because like I'm not a scientist. I don't understand it a ton, but like I'm assuming gluten has like a little scientific code thing, right? That my body's gonna read and go, no, is this fancy gluten? Congratulations, Jess, on this fancy bread. I'm still going to freak out and
mm.
think that it's some crazy disease I have to destroy. And I'm going to throw it up 2 hours later. And I'll just be throwing up even more expensive bread. Um, so it's like, I just had to sit there and be like, oh, that's so interesting. Next time I don't have an autoimmune disease, like I'll be sure to try out the organic bread. But it's hard because, like, I don't, first of all, I was being inspected, so I was not going to be rude. but it's not, I wouldn't have been rude anyways. But it was so hard because it's like, well, did you know? Like, if you just did this, you wouldn't have to have celiac. I'm like, should
Well,
you maybe go tell my gastroenterologist team in Boston that I wouldn't have to have celiac if I just ate better bread? Like,
well, I have two stories similar to that. One is like when I'm in the office and I'm eating my lunch or a snack or something like that. There's this one coworker that he'd come up to me all the time, and be like, "Oh my gosh, that's gluten free." And it got to the point when I was like, "Bud, like, of course it is." So he would
right.
say, he'd be like, "Oh, is that gluten free?" I'm like, "Oh no!" Like, and like pretend that it wasn't. I'm like, "Of course it's gluten free. Why would I like? You think this is my first date being gluten free? Like, I of course I
That
try
happens
everything."
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
that's
that's
free.
gluten free. I'm like, "Oh no, is it?" And of course it is. But so there's that, and then we used to work with someone, Jess, and I think this is before you were gluten free, but she had like gluten intolerance,
Mhm.
and she's like, "Nick, Bud Light, gluten free." I was like, "Absolutely not." And she goes, "Yeah, there's no, I think like wheat in it or something." Because they like list the ingredients of Bud Light like on the box now because they're like super proud of it only having like three things, and one of them is
Mhm.
barley, which is a gluten. So she's like, "Oh yeah, there's
Right.
no like wheat or anything in it. So it's gluten free." I'm like, "Negative. Barley is a gluten, and like I'm actually just straight up allergic to barley anyway." So I
Right.
think
You were
like
like anaphylactically allergic.
yeah, so like for me to get out of like that conversation, I was just like, "Oh, I'm allergic to barley anyway." Like I got like the prick test, and it was like, "Oh, you can't eat barley." That was before I was gluten free. So, but I'm like,
Right.
she clearly has no idea what she's talking about. But like, don't tell me, someone who's a celiac, like to go drink a beer that definitely has gluten in it because you were told there wasn't from
Well, and
wherever you
like
got
sure,
information.
there's not wheat,
Yeah.
but there's barley. Like, and that's because even with a gluten intolerance, like gluten intolerance is very real, and you still can't have barley.
No, and
Like
that's
gluten is
what got me
gluten.
because I think I tried telling her, I'm like, there's more, like gluten is just more than wheat, and she goes, "No, no, no, like
Right.
this is fine though." And I'm like, "Who is telling you that you can have this?" And she was just so certain that like that I could have it, and I was like, "Look, I don't need your advice. I see like you know professionals about this all the time. I've had like at that point I'd had like 8 endoscopies. I'm like, I think I know what I'm doing here." um,
Right.
but it's just like it's stuff like that where people who I think it all comes from a good place, like my coworker being like, "Oh my gosh, is that gluten free?" Like they're
Right.
looking out for me. Like he's not doing it to be like a jerk. He's doing it because he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh my goodness, that doesn't look like it'd be gluten free." And I get that and I appreciate it, but at the same time, like you know I I'd like to think I have it under control. As I tell you all the times I've been gluten where I wasn't in control, but
But
it's
that
one of
was
those
your
things.
choice. Like
Yeah,
that's your choice.
like yeah, if I get gluten, it was my choice to not read labels and stuff. But like when someone comes up to me and says like, "Oh, this is gluten free," or like you said, just try to eat gluten, but like the really nice quality of gluten, like that's not how that works. Like we've been doing it long enough where like we appreciate the advice and we appreciate people looking out for us, but like
Yeah.
it's
Well,
tough.
I'll say I don't appreciate the advice. I appreciate the kindness
Yes, the
where the
kindness.
advice is coming from,
Mm-hmm.
but especially like when it was a new diagnosis for me and everybody like it was still really I was really grieving still.
Yeah.
The amount of people who thought like think they're being helpful and I think we already covered this in the beginning where like you and I both are very grateful for all of the support and things like that. But it's like there's this other side where like, but it's also my mental health, right? We're like always having to pick where we have to go. Good
Mm-hmm.
intention, right? People are trying to look out for us. And it's a lot of pressure. It's exhausting. And I don't always want to have to be the one because it's reminding me that I'm different and that I don't have the freedom to go wherever anyone wants to go. Right. And it's the same thing with like, oh, well, have you tried this? And like, oh, you can, it only has like a little bit of gluten in it, or like, you can't just have like one crumb. And like that's literally the limit is one crumb.
Yeah.
So you get less than a crumb in that. Like it's a constant reminder of how we have to live differently, and most of the time I'm fine. And then you have a day this Saturday where I would just like shut down because I'm like, this really sucks that it's taken this much effort to find out I can't eat here. We didn't eat until like 8 o'clock that night because then I was like, I don't even want to pick where we're eating. Like I was so grumpy about it.
Well, and that ends up happening with me too, where I'm not necessarily going out, but it's like when I'm cooking on my own too. Like I just don't. This I don't think really has much to do with me gluten free, but like it, even if it isn't me going out, I don't want to cook, right? So I
Cooking
keep
soy.
putting it off, and then I just a lot of times I just end up at Chipotle because I
Oh,
can
really?
eat there. I know it's gluten free, but like I don't want to go anywhere else because I don't want to put in the time and research to look up if they have anything for me. And like, there's a place that's actually in my building. Like it's on the first floor. It's this Greek restaurant, and they say they have a gluten free menu, but then you read like on like Find Me Gluten Free, people are like they have no clue what they're talking about. Like when you say I'm gluten free, so there's that too. Where you're like, well, do I trust that guy who had like one bad experience? Um, so
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great point because another ugly is when we decided we weren't going to go eat at the restaurant near our house. We went on our walk, which was good for everybody's mental health because then we got back and had to figure out what we were going to have. And Ryan and I were both on the Find Me Gluten Free app, and it is an incredible resource. I have to say, like, I live and die by that app. But to like read through the comments and like everybody's review about why they didn't have a good thing and like where I got sick over the summer, like one of the first times I was like violently true blue, I ate gluten. Um, their reviews are fine. So like I was the anomaly and in general. So like how many of those were just the anomaly and more people are gonna write a review when they had a bad experience.
yeah,
Uh,
I say it all the time. Like when you go on these apps, like no one is like, you don't go on like, wow, this place was amazing. Like you might, but you'll get more people writing like, oh my gosh, I got gluten because this guy had no clue. I'm like,
mhm.
well, maybe that was 3 years ago and that guy doesn't work there anymore. Like, that
Right.
your bad experience yes, you may have a 1 star, but it's still like a 4.5 star out of 5. Like, you're just the only one expressing how you feel about
Right. There was a restaurant that I really love, Street in Portsmouth. And I've eaten there, well, I had a stretch, I ate there a lot, but I've eaten there maybe once in person and then I got a lot of takeout once I figured it out. But the first time I ate there, I made myself sick with nervousness, because of the reviews that they had, which were awful, like 2 stars maybe. But they were from 3 years ago, and since then they've been bought, and no one's really commented on it since then, which to me says things have gotten better because no one's felt like they needed to come on and warn you about this experience. And like, I haven't written a review on my bad experience in Portsmouth because I'm nervous that like overall they do a good job. I've eaten there before.
it.
So it's hard. The ugly, you got to weed through it.
Well, there's one more before we like kind of start wrapping things up that I think this is
Yeah.
something that you do, and it's that you bring a med bag everywhere. I don't
Uh,
do that, so tell us what that looks like.
yeah. So this is the ugly, but has gotten better with time. Is when I was first diagnosed, my symptoms were like, I'm sure there are people with worse, but mine were more significant than yours because you didn't have any
Yep.
symptoms. So I was prescribed Zofran, which is for nausea, and dicyclamine for, yeah, I
That
think
sounds
that's
right.
it. Well, because I'm thinking of like there's antibiotics that sounds familiar, but I think it's dicyclamine, which is for like the pain in my stomach that I get, when it's for like stomach cramping, but for me it feels like there's nails trying to get out of my stomach when I get gluten. So I have meds for that. I get headaches when I get gluten. So I carried Excedrin migraine with me. I carried peppermint tea with me. I carried digestive bitters. Um, I'm trying to think of what else. is in my med bag. I can do a whole episode on what is in Jess med bag. But the idea is like when I was first diagnosed, because then I was scared too of like vitamin D deficiencies, like all the vitamin deficiencies, iron and things like that that come with celiac disease or can come with celiac disease. So I was losing weight, was symptomatic, but my labs were fine. Like I was not malnourished. But I was still wicked nervous and had like all of these vitamins. So I had like a bag with a handle that went everywhere with me because I was so nervous that I was going to get sick somewhere and not have like anything to help myself. And what was hard about like my first probably year is my symptoms were not managed. So even if I wasn't exposed to gluten, I would still get nauseous. I would still have stomach pain because my body was just trying to heal. So I would be like at work when we were waiters together and just have to like go back and take his Zofran and like keep working because my symptoms were just sort of out of control. So it's better. It's like a million times better now, but I still carry it with me. And since I opened my practice, um, I switched it between work bags because I'm like, I am not going to be at this place. And I even needed it, knock on wood, outside of actually being gluten, where I'm like throwing up and then taking Zofran because that's the best thing ever to have.
Well, and like,
Advocate for that at your doctor's office.
well, and that's the thing too. Like, you have a med bag because when you were diagnosed, your symptoms were running wild, and that's because too. We have a whole other episode planned to talk about our diagnosis, but like, you were
Right.
feeling sick, so you went to the doctor, and like, you have celiac. For me, I don't even know when I got celiac. I wasn't showing symptoms like one would. Like I wasn't getting sick. I wasn't, um, you know, like throwing up or anything like that. But I was just ill. Like we have photos and stuff that I can show. They're awful, but they basically like that photo was like peak them trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And so I didn't have symptoms. So I never had to get this kind of medicine. So it's something that like I never had to experience, but Jess does because of the way like her celiac kind of manifested in her and the diagnosis came along.
Right. And that's with travel too. Like I had to find room in my suitcase for this like mini luggage of meds. And like I said, so I've significantly downsized that bag because it's also carrying like, a BJ's or Sam's Club size thing of Excedrin. You don't need that. Just bring five. What are the chances you need more than five? Um, so
That's a
since I've
bad
gotten
thing.
more comfortable, yeah, but since I've gotten more comfortable having celiac disease, which comes with time, the less I've felt like, oh, I've got to carry this with me, um, which is just like good for space purposes. It takes up a lot of space.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean,
So
that's just a bunch of uglies we have. I think we wanted to wrap this thing up though by do we want to talk just about how we tell restaurants we're gluten free and how we do that, or do we think we covered that enough at the beginning?
I would like to just give if you have what you want to say, but I have specific language I want to offer to other people that I have found really helpful because this question is what sparked this three-part series.
Yeah.
So
Well, here let
I,
me go
you know,
first because you can give the like true therapy answer. I'll tell you like just the way I go about doing it, and it's um, you know, so my example will be I go to Jersey Mike's all the time. Not it's like why would you go to a seafood place if you're allergic to like shellfish? Like why would you go to a sandwich shop if you're celiac? But I do it, and I tell them like, hey, I'm gluten free. Um, I'm like, it's an allergy. I tell them straight up what it is, and then I sit there and watch them change their gloves and everything to make myself feel okay with it. Um,
mhm.
but I think the biggest thing for me is when you go in, like it is the language I use is that it's an allergy, where it's not an allergy, but for other people and the restaurant business to understand, like they're not, I'm gonna be like, oh, it's an autoimmune disease. They're gonna be like, I don't know what that means. So I tell them it's an
Mhm.
allergy and that like I will get very ill if it comes to that, I tell them, but like, yeah, it's an allergy and they need to treat it with, as much cautiousness as they can.
Right. Well, I mean, that's helpful because the question is like, do you want me to have an anaphylactic reaction in your restaurant? I won't, but
They don't
you
know.
don't know that.
Yeah. You don't know how allergic I am.
So I don't disagree with that. I think I've used that up until recently, saying that I have a gluten allergy and that I actually I don't. That's all I say. I have a gluten allergy. I'm like, okay. Or so then can I have a gluten-free bun or whatever?
Yeah.
Um, so that's been helpful. But the language that I have been using recently that feels natural, that does not make me anxious, is um, I have celiac disease, so I have to eat gluten-free. Um, and it's just I've gotten a good response from it. I feel like I'm giving them as much information as I need to give them. I'm not asking them any questions. It's like, this is what it is. And it makes me feel better about the, oh, I could never eat gluten free comments you get unsolicited. Um, because I'm saying I have celiac disease, so I have to eat gluten free, um, has been helpful for me in better advocating for myself. So that's been
Well,
helpful.
and to me that also adds like a severity to it. Like if I just say I have a gluten allergy, like that could mean like I could have a slight intolerance. I could, just not like gluten and but like want them to take it seriously. If you say you have celiac disease, I cannot eat gluten free, like I think in their mind it puts like, oh, they're serious. This isn't just like them like they will just get like a little stomach ache and can take like, a Tums to make themselves feel better. This is something that will greatly affect their day and possibly week depending on who you are.
Right. And that's why I think I like it because it is saying like I have celiac because it also avoids that like, oh, is it celiac or is it a preference question? Because I'm so grateful when places ask that, but I kind of hate answering like, oh, I have celiac. Because
Yeah.
then you'll always get like, oh, that sucks. I'm like, you're telling me. I'm like, thanks.
Well,
Where again, it's good intentioned, but it doesn't always feel that good to be like, get this pity. You're like, listen, person, I live this every day of my life.
well, like you said earlier too, it makes you like they're putting it back in your face, like, oh, you're different.
Mm-hmm.
When it's like it's a honestly a lot of people have celiac disease or gluten intolerance. Like it's very common now, and a
It's like
lot of
one in 113 people.
yeah, like it's very common. And honestly, I think that's higher. But like I think that isn't is that the diagnosed number?
No, I think that it's one in 113, and not all those people know they have it.
Because I mean, I have friends out here where they're like, oh, I get like super sick when I eat X, Y, and Z. I'm like, that sounds really
Celiac.
close to what I have, you know. Um,
Talk about unsolicited advice. Me telling people they've got celiac disease.
I've
No one wants to hear it.
yeah, I've self-diagnosed like 5 people with celiac. I was wildly incorrect, but um,
But maybe one time you're right, you know?
yeah. And to me, I'm like, for me, it's trying to get them to go through like the process of being like, hey, you're feeling sick because you're eating food. I know it sucks, but you need to go see a doctor. Like,
Right.
you have to have an endoscopy. You have to, maybe get a blood test done to see what's wrong with you because like you shouldn't be throwing up when you have food. You
No,
shouldn't be having like diarrhea after you eat every meal, which like literally
every
one of my
every
friends
meal.
was doing. Like every meal she had, she'd go and like run to the bathroom. I'm like, friend,
Right.
you want to get that checked out.
Right. Well, and that's what's hard too because people are like, well, I don't want to give up bread, or like I could never give up bread. I'm like, but I couldn't throw up after every meal anymore. Like it's not sustainable. So and we've already covered this, but like it was easy for me because I'm like, I don't want to be like killed over in pain for 4 hours every time I eat an English muffin. Like, no, gluten-free English muffin's fine, thanks. I'll go about my day.
Yeah, just slap some peanut butter on that and you really can't tell the difference. But
Listen, my nutritionist in Boston told me that an English muffin is just a vessel for the toppings. There's no nutritional value in an English muffin. Yeah, I see your thumbs up, but like what she's saying is like don't eat them. Because when you put peanut butter on it, then you're basically just eating peanut butter, which also like it's not like we're eating fancy peanut butter, so it's like sugar. So, do I think of her sometimes when I'm eating I mean, I had a bagel with peanut butter this morning. So,
Look,
I'm not.
that's the ugly part of being celiac. The not ugly part is eating peanut butter on French toast whenever you want. Not French toast, English muffin.
Yeah. I mean, French toast, that sounds kind of good too.
I mean, we're all for peanut butter. So, um,
And on anything. You'll see that on our Nick's gluten-free kitchen menu, where it's basically my dream menu. Where if I would need it, I'm not making it. Because how do you taste test something you don't like? I don't understand it. There will be some stuff like blueberry pie. I'm not a fan of, but I also we're making it, and I can't. I don't understand. Does it taste good? I don't like fruit pie.
well, and what's lovely about Nick's Gluten Free Kitchen is that they are all snack size. So if you're ever like, I need a snack while I go out, Nick's Gluten Free Kitchen.
Swing by, pick up your food.
Yeah,
Yes, because we'll have different like sizes of stuff. So
sure. So,
because we made Rice Krispies and we individually packed them, I just packed one in my lunch today. So,
well,
so yes, lots of fun stuff thinking about the future. So this wraps up our three-part series. We've got a lot more to talk about. I'm pretty sure every episode we say like, oh, that's another episode. So we would love to keep doing this. We're gonna at least do our diagnosis stories, but let us know what you want to hear. This whole series was inspired by talking with somebody in our DMs. So definitely let us know if you're like, hey, love to hear you talk about whatever it is.
well, and I think too,
Yeah.
like it's not necessarily like yes, we're talking strictly about being gluten free, but I mean, I've been on all kinds of elimination diets, whether like you have to be lactose intolerant now. I think a lot of these things can help with that as well. Like, the going out to eat, the ugly parts of any diet that is forced upon you due to, a disease or an allergy or something like that. I think this all can help with that. So
Yeah.
again, it just doesn't have to be, gluten free. Of course, that's where we are. So that's what we're going to talk about. But
Where I'm the expert.
yeah, so whatever kind of questions you have about diets, eating out, any trip, really messed up. Any trip, oh my goodness, any tips about how to manage a gluten free lifestyle or an allergy lifestyle. I think we'd love to talk about. And Jess has all the good therapy advice too, because like when she said earlier, like, yeah, I ended up talking myself through how to deal with the anxiety of going to go get food. So
Yeah, there's help, and there's a community out there, and we're here. So don't hesitate to DM us just questions if you don't want to hear a whole podcast about it. Just reach out. We're here to answer questions. Neither one of us are, it's like professionally trained to give advice on celiac, but we can give you like the down low on real life with celiac. And if you've got questions about mental health, I am licensed in 2 states, 3 technically. So let me know what you got questions about. All right. So this wraps up our 3-part series. You can find part 1 and 2 and this third part all on Apple Podcasts. You can find it on Spotify. You can find our video version on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, Nick's Gluten Free Kitchen. You can also catch all of the episodes on our website, nicksgfkitchen.com. So lots of different opportunities to stream it. Check it out. If you're just joining us, there's some other catch up the 2 before that. But we are so grateful that you guys keep coming back, and we hope to see you again next week.
bye now.
Bye.